Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas W1DED. I'm in Turks and Caicos operating as Victor Papa 5 stroke Whiskey 1 Delta Echo Delta. And I turned on the radio the other day, and one of the first callers back to me was K1RX from New England, Mark Pride. And he started giving me some pointers on how to handle some of these huge pileups. And I asked him, maybe we should turn the cameras on and we should have a conversation on air for an interview. And he agreed to do that. So Mark is with me today. Mark, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. This is really quite a treat.
Well, I appreciate the advice you gave me the other day, and I'm not sure if we can replicate it all, but hopefully we'll get into some of it. But before we do that, give the audience some background about your ham radio experience and how you get started and the things that interest you most nowadays.
Okay. Got started in 1963, age 12. One of my first contest experiences was with, like so many, field day, and did things like novice roundup, which was popular back then. And from there, I just kind of launched into contesting from all kinds of different activities along the way. It was good. Been in the hobby about 60 years now. And most of my activity is focused on contesting, HF contesting, not too much VHF. And I've consolidated all my experience from an antenna farm perspective into a single tower. I've got multiple Yagis on the tower, and I kind of picked the best of the best out of my past QTH and put them up on this 75-foot tower. And then put together a single op 2 radio arrangement in the shack, kind of a mirror image each other, two K3s, two Alpha 89 amplifiers, and then some antenna switching on the tabletop to facilitate easy band changing and different directions that are needed from time to time. So. That's kind of the background as far as the local issue, but contesting as a whole, I've enjoyed it right from the start. I've always found it's like kind of bringing everything together in the hobby, from the ergonomics of laying out the equipment on the desk so you can sit there for many hours, to antennas and improving antenna performance year after year. Thinking of different ways to improve your score overall through all kinds of changes. And I found contesting, like I said, just brings everything together. Computer logging, all of the challenges in making computers talk to radios and vice versa, that we've all experienced some frustration. And overall, it's really just been an exciting career for me. Last 50 years, I'd say, of contesting as a whole. Along the way, became president of the Northeast contest group up here in New England called the Yankee Clipper Contest Club. I was president for about 7 or 8 years, and we were having a lot of fun back then getting all the troops to get on the air and make points and beat our club competition down the road in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. So it's been good.
Well, first of all, I like what you said about contesters. I've been told several times with my YouTube channel that I'm speaking to a relatively small niche within ham radio. And my response usually is, I enjoy talking to these guys because they are pushing the limit on equipment and setup and antennas and ergonomics, all the things that you've just mentioned, as well as operating styles. So I think there's a lot for everybody to learn from a contester, even if they choose not to go full in as you might, or people in the Yankee Clipper Contest Club might. So thanks for that. The one thing you didn't mention about your background, and maybe you're just being modest, but since I've talked to you in the past, I know the other important thing for you is mentoring, which is an interesting intersection with this call because you're going to give me some advice later on. But tell me a little bit about how you have mentored people and brought them into your shack and showed them how to contest.
Well, I'll tell you, that's probably been the greatest joy of late, is to bring in somebody with limited experience. Maybe they were at field day and I happened to notice, gosh, these guys have some potential, or these young ladies have some potential to grow in this aspect of the hobby. And I've invited them to the house and kind of gone gone through the training of, how my equipment works and how to select different antennas and things like that. And in that process, I've actually learned a bit more about really how to help them. I see the kind of questions they ask, and then I think, what's the best response for that kind of a scenario? And that, that's kind of, furthered the whole excitement of mentoring kids and adults for that matter. I've had 60, 70-year-old people come in and play contests for a while and have some fun with that. I'm trying to show them, hands-on how to run a pileup and how to go search for multipliers and just generally use the equipment they've got that's in front of them, usually my shack, to maximize their score. And when they look at the score summary on the computer monitor, they're always astounded how quickly their score went up. And gee, look at all the states that I just worked, or look at all the countries I just worked in the last hour. It's incredible. I couldn't do this, at home. This is just fantastic. So my thinking through a lot of this is put these new people in a decent quality station that's fairly competitive, and give them the opportunity to experience really what I'll say an optimum setup looks like and how it feels and how it hears the DX. And then they can go home and say, oh, well, okay, I've got some noise issues here. I can see that it's not as good as what I just experienced, but it gives them now a little more insight into where they need to be ultimately, with their equipment, their antennas, things like that. I've tried to incorporate a lot of conveniences into my setup to allow, quick band changes and antenna selection with a foot switch instead of reaching over to a toggle switch to switch an antenna. In other words, take your hand off the keyboard and add some efficiency. And when they see all that in action and they actually experience it, it's just kind of eye-opening for them. And it just furthers the excitement where they can go home and start to look for improvements at their own place. So that's worked out well. But clearly, sitting side by side and kind of coaching them along, put them in front of a big pileup and let them deal with it, and give them some hints on how to manage it. They usually get it pretty well done. And I've had people come in here with experience that might show 20 contacts per hour kind of experience level. And by the time they leave, they're fairly comfortable at 100 per hour. And it's just so startling, and the adrenaline flow is so exciting to see that happen. So that's how we get them launched. And then anytime they ever want to come back and operate for any other contest, they're always welcome. I'm not too concerned about, my station being top 10 or winning every single event. I feel like I've kind of done that. So effectively, I'm kind of giving back. I'm really trying to pay it forward in a lot of ways.
Well, clearly you're good at it, Mark. And I want to make the point that in a hobby where providing advice and mentoring is really important, not everybody is good at it. I think that as a relatively newcomer to the hobby, I was licensed back in 1978, but then I took a 40-year break. It's difficult, first of all, to know the right questions to ask. And then secondly, some people aren't that receptive to what they might perceive to be dumb questions. You kind of get this feeling like, well, go operate the radio for a while and come back when you know more. And you have this way, I think, of making that information accessible. I don't know what to ask sometimes, and frankly, that's why I've enjoyed doing these interviews. I'm totally comfortable asking the dumb questions, and I've been able to interview people that don't mind answering them. But again, I want to give you credit that not everybody is a great teacher, and you clearly are. And I saw that the other day when you and I were talking on our QSO. So thank you for that. So let's dive into where I'm at here. Before we get into the contest, I'm here to operate the CQ WPX in another weekend. I may do the sprint on Saturday. I think I will, as a matter of fact. But in the meantime, I've been running pretty big pileups here from VP5, and it doesn't take long, even without spotting, although I have been spotting the last couple of days, to develop a pretty big pileup. And pileup management, even though I've listened to the contest crew talk about it, is much different when you're into it for literally hours at a time. And, I'm finding that I'm getting a lot of callers from North America because I'm relatively strong there, but I'm trying to get the Europeans through the pileup. So let's just start with a broad question. When you approach a pileup, how do you maneuver through that?
And you're talking about calling a station in a pileup or just running the pileup?
That's a good distinction. I'm running a pileup.
Okay. Uh, I think probably the one of the key things is to establish a cadence. Something that becomes very predictable on the other side. They can hear you CQ, hear the way you're responding to people, noticing that you're coming back almost immediately to either a partial call or a full call sign. And very quickly they can ascertain, okay, this guy has got a rhythm going, a cadence, and this is how he operates, and I can see it's pretty comfortable, and I can get into this calling sequence, hopefully, and get through. And one of the things I've always thought about is what is the operator at the other end hearing? He hears this cadence, CQ contest, and then the call sign, and of course you stress the call sign, not so much the CQ or the contest word, but your call. And maximum clarity is absolutely necessity here. And you want to always modulate at the full power. You don't want to have like a varying volume in your microphone. Like for yourself, CQ contest, VP5, echo, that kind of a swing in volume is just not going to be conducive to good communications. So I'm looking at my output meter, the watt meter, and I'm trying to maintain maximum output while I'm doing all of this. If I move away from the mic for some reason, the volume drops, and that'll translate to probably some errors or some confusion or something. So I look to have a very rigorous cadence that I follow, and then the operator at the other end quickly determines this guy's organized and he's flowing at a good pace, and really important, he's answering on the first call. Every time somebody calls, he's coming back to someone every single time, not, pausing and waiting for a minute for the whole pileup to get completely out of hand. But he's just forcing the issue to come back to somebody every single time you listen. And the listening period is very short. And once they understand that, then they realize, okay, I probably shouldn't be bothered calling multiple times. Delta Lima 5 XYZ or whatever, and you say that call 3 or 4 times without listening, that will be to your detriment. You will not get through. But if you're calling once or you're timing your one call properly in the pileup, you'll get through, or you'll be partially recognized. And that's another thing I try to do is when I hear a pileup and people are calling me, of course I'll generally pick the loudest guy, what I think might be the quickest and easiest QSO. But at the same time, I'm kind of keeping my ear out for, that weak G3 or UA9 or somebody, some flutter on his signal. So he's coming in over the North Pole. So that might be kind of a unique multiplier. So I keep my ears open for kind of a wider range of callers. I may not get the complete call. Generally, I never do. But to at least have part of a call, and I put that in the back of my mind so that when I'm finished with the first QSO or the first station that called me, I can immediately go back to, okay, the UA9 or whatever. And again, that sends the message of control in the pileup too. You are responsible for managing this mess, not the people calling. And you've got to be absolutely strict with yourself and the callers and maintain that cadence. But again, having tricks like, being able to hear other guys calling and remember them, you can immediately come back. So that just speeds up the whole QSO rate process. At least that's been my experience.
So speaking of cadence, and I'd like your opinion on this, I suspect that running a DX pileup is a little bit different than running a contest. But in either case, should I be coming back with the same thing every time? I've noticed during these DX pileups that I've been running, I may say, thank you, QRZ Victor Papa 5. Sometimes I say QRZ Victor Papa 5. Should I always be coming back with the same phrase all the time?
Yeah, that does help establish that cadence. They start to expect these words, however you're acknowledging the contact and moving on to the next caller. That does need to be consistent. But frankly, I'll get on every morning on 10 meters when the band is open and work probably 100 Europeans on phone just, from this location. And I'll offer up some personal comment about, the shack or the antennas every once in a while. And what I've kind of discovered along the way is that there's kind of a large listening audience. There are people sitting there saying, "Oh, I heard in that QSO 5, 5 QSOs ago that you had, an old piece of gear, and hey, I've got the same thing. Oh, okay, cool. Let's talk about that for, 15 seconds." And we just kind of quickly establish a nice personal connection, even though you're in the midst of a, fairly high QSO rate activity. But when it comes to the contesting aspect of it, there you want to be in a very strict minimum number of words, maximum communication. That's the thing you've got to really focus on. Don't have these extraneous, thanks for the contact, 73, and good DX to your dog, and easy on the mustard, kinds of additional comments. They add no value. And meanwhile, you're probably frustrating somebody at the other end who's been calling you 3 or 4 times and can't get through. So the shorter you make the exchange and get that moved along, the more people you're going to make happy. If you were doing that contest style in a non-contest mode that I was just describing, that sounds a little cold and impersonal. I don't really like that. But when it comes to contesting, people recognize it's a serious activity and everybody wants to be efficient. You're against the clock. You're racing against time. So everybody wants to say the minimum to convey the maximum and move on to the next contact. So that's my bit of wisdom on that one.
I also wanted to tell a story about modulating your voice. You had mentioned that earlier. And I think I do have a tendency, particularly when I'm a little bit further into a pileup and, the rates start to increase 150, maybe even up to 180, 190 per hour. And I can feel my voice rising. And I remember being in a contest and hearing N6MJ. He was operating from ND7K, and I've heard him several times since. Now, this is one of the best contest operators in the world. And he had just this steady modulation to his voice all the time. Didn't matter how big the pileup was. It was just so steady and calm. And I think you're right. I think that really helped kind of punch it through. And it helped create a pacing, I think, in his QSO exchange that was probably helpful. So I think I saw that in action then. One of the questions I have for you, Mark, and I agree with the idea that get back to anybody right away, either with a full call sign or partial. What I've been finding, particularly the last couple of days now that I'm beaming Europe, that even when I respond right away, when I let off the mic, people are still calling. And the person I'm responding to can't always hear me because of the pileup itself. What do I do in that case? Just continue with the same cadence and let them catch up? Or is there a pause that's necessary?
Well, are you describing a situation where you've established a QSO, but you haven't got the call sign complete, or something's missing, and you're trying to get the rest of the pileup to stop calling so you can complete that? Is that the challenge?
Well, it's a little bit of both. So let's say I call somebody back, Charlie Oscar Lima, and I'm looking for the full call. And the pileup really hasn't changed at all, and they haven't really heard me. But sometimes I'll come back to somebody, a Kilo 7 Charlie Oscar Lima, and I can tell they didn't hear me because of the pileup. So I'm waiting, no response. I have to call again. So in those cases, I'm wondering, am I being a little bit too fast? Should I wait until the pileup slows down a bit before I respond, or do I just still stick with the same pacing?
Well, you've got to listen, obviously, to get those call signs. And if it takes repeating, you have to do that. There are times when I tend to respond to the first people I hear in the pileup. So the first person that calls, in that first couple of nanoseconds, as soon as I start listening, Like if it's G1, and then next thing you know, the whole pileup is on there, and it wipes out the rest of the call. I come back to the G1, unless there's somebody in that pileup that's just so much louder, and I get a complete call. I mean, the goal is to get a complete call, respond completely, and you can move on. But when you run into trouble when you get partial calls, and you can't, make that happen in a smoother fashion. So as a result of that, I'll say Golf 1, and then I might say it again in that same mess, and eventually, or not eventually, but within a second, the guy that I was calling or responding to, he comes back with a complete call and he's in the clear. So that you do have to repeat, and sometimes, yes, you have to be sensitive to the pileup in that callers are wiping you out. Now, I am a little surprised that you're having issues on like 10 meters, because generally on 10, the calling stations really don't hear each other very well. Very weak, backscatter, things like that. I find greatest success, the higher the band I go, the more I can control the pileups, because they can hear me so much easier. I'm louder than the pileup. And that's, when you've got that going for you, you've got complete dominance and control over the situation. Where you run into trouble is like on the lower bands, like on 40 meters. Everybody can hear each other in Europe, or a lot of them. And calling someone in the Caribbean, it's just going to be tough. And it's a slow rate because there's just so much QRM. And it's a lot of work. I mean, way more work than doing 10 meters, let me tell you, as you probably experienced. So you just have to be sensitive to what are these people hearing. And if you're noticing people are not either responding to you immediately, then you've got to say it twice. You just have to. Charlie Oscar Lima, a slight pause, Charlie Oscar Lima, because you've got to time your response to the pileup calling to be heard. And, it's kind of a back and forth, a dynamic you got to play with. And you always have to be sensitive to that. So that's an issue. And I can feel your pain, believe me.
So my next question, I feel as though has been answered in prior interviews, but I'm curious what you think of it. There's been conversation, particularly with the contest crew, about some of the, let's call it bad behavior, when people just are relentless and just talking over. And the advice I've gotten in the past is just deal with them and move them out of the way. Is that how you approach it, Mark?
Yeah, if there's a caller that constantly wipes out whatever I'm trying to hear, incessant calling, or I'll call it overly aggressive. I do try to get those guys worked and out of the way quickly, because that just slows me down on a quality pileup run. The same with I've had instances where people call and there's so much distortion in their audio. I've got to call them out, work them if I can even understand their call, and give them a little advice that, hey, check your radio. You sound horrendous, and you will never work anybody if you continue to operate with that terrible audio. So I try and offer some help along the way on those really bad offenders. So that's kind of the way I handle it. Pretty much, I guess, like everybody else.
Yeah, I've had those situations with the bad audio. I've had several of them, actually, and it's so bad that it just wipes out everybody else. And I've had to really strain my ears to understand exactly what they're saying, just so that I can work them and move on.
Exactly.
So let's move into contest mode. So I'm getting ready, as we've discussed, for the CQ WPX during the last weekend in March. Just in general, before we get into specifics, what advice do you have moving into that contest, and what's your experience been with that contest?
Well, first of all, WPX is a rate contest. By that I mean all you want to do the entire time period is run people. That's the ideal. And hopefully you've got a signal that can support running all the time. Of course, you can't do that. Bands change, QSO count drops off, and you've got to do something else. So during those slower periods, okay, you go look for multipliers. You tune around and you find, because that's only going to help your score, of course. But it's really all about rate. And it's the same with like ARRL sideband and CWDX contest. everybody wants to work a state or the state that you're in. The world is chasing the U.S. and Canada for that event. And it's just pure rate. And the multipliers will take care of themselves generally. So you've got to just kind of play that game. WPX similar, except now you're giving out numbers. But the interesting thing, there are so many prefixes that count as multipliers. I mean, and the score just skyrockets with that going on. So you really don't have to hunt around too much. A lot of the multipliers will call you. But when it slows down, pay attention to that and go off and maybe point the antenna toward North America and work all those WB3s, WA9s. I mean, they all count as separate multipliers. And same with JA. If the band opens to JA, you want to really focus a lot of attention on working many stations there, because there's going to be probably 3 multipliers for every 5 calls that come through. So that's something you got to be aware of.
And the WPX is unique in that you can only work 36 hours as a signal up, or 24 hours if you're doing the classic overlay. How would you suggest I approach managing those hours?
Well, first question, since we appear to have internet connection between New Hampshire and Turks and Caicos, I assume that you might be going assisted in this contest. Is that the case or no?
That is the case, yes.
Okay. Yeah, obviously the best if you can get spotted, that's key, but you don't want to be asked to be spotted, because that's not with the rules. You cannot spot yourself. CQ doesn't allow self-spotting. There's been some confusion in that in some of the different contests throughout the year. Some people think, oh, they've changed all the ruling on self-spotting, so I'll just do it. And next thing you know, you submitted your log and they say, oh, I noticed you spotted yourself 10 times. Sorry, that was not within the scope of the rules. Lesson learned. But in this case, no spotting of yourself, so you're going to be counting on hopefully people, and given the fact you're a VP5, I don't think that's really going to be an issue. You're going to be spotted pretty quickly and often, so that's good. The cadence routine we talked about, are you using N1MM for the logging program?
I am, yes.
Okay. I would, and another question, are you running your microphone through the computer, not direct to the radio, so you can take advantage of the memories, like the function keys in the computer as organized by N1MM? Is that within your capability there too?
Yes, I have not yet set those up, but my intention is to set up the F keys.
Okay. Well, that'll be a big help, especially the CQing. When things do slow down, you want to have that F1 button programmed. The cadence on that one might be CQ contest, Victor Papa 5 Echo, Victor Papa 5 Echo, boom. If you decide I want to go shorter with that, when suddenly, okay, people have now found me, but not enough people, so I want to still CQ every time or once in a while. Instead of having the last call sign go out, you hit the escape button to stop that second iteration of the call. So it ends up being CQ contest, Victor Papa 5 Echo, boom. But when you need to attract some attention, maybe let the second call flow through. The alternative to that would be program the F1 to be CQ contest, Victor Papa 5 Echo, and that's the end of it. And then when you decide I want to add another call sign or add another additional message there, I can just hit the F4 button, which will be your call sign and only your call. So you can play it either way. I tend to, I don't do the auto repeat routine. I always try to, it keeps me more engaged in the process. If I let it run like every 2 seconds, so the CQ is going to go out, and then I stop it when I get an answer. I don't prescribe to that approach. I like the approach of you're there, you do it manually, and if you decide you want to shorten the call, you can hit the escape button and chop off that second ID. The next thing would be the F2 button, which is typically used for the exchange. Of course, in this exchange, it's a signal report and a serial number. So you can't increment the serial number through the F2 button. So maybe it's just simply you just program it as 59. And then when that's transmitting, you can kind of look at your next number coming up. You can kind of cue yourself up mentally and say, when they hit the F2 button, it says 59. Okay, at that point, you interject 1943, 1943 QSO. And in giving the numbers, I think I would, each number announce rather than say 1943. What? You can imagine the station at the other end, English is not their first language. It just kind of blows over them and they have no idea. So you're back to repeating that number again, 1943. I mean, really, enunciate those numbers clearly. And then for the next button, the F3, which would be the acknowledgement, the thank you button, that I would probably just do thanks, Victor Papa 5 Echo, boom. And then the next station's already calling you at that point. And then, of course, F4 is your call sign. So I would work very hard to keep hitting those function keys to save your voice, and it will help with a cadence. If you start going live with your CQs, you might kind of, drift off in your thoughts, and, suddenly the CQ went 3 times. I signed my call once. I didn't sign it clearly. That was just a waste, So, again, get back just constantly hitting the F1 button, constantly. And when you hear a pileup and you can't sort any of it out, maybe thanks K VP5 Echo, even though you're not finishing a QSO, but it's a way of kind of still establishing control of the frequency. So that's how I would probably play that scenario with N1MM using the memories, etc. And one other thought, and this always drives me crazy, using the mouse. A lot of people like to use the mouse, have it move it around from the entry window over to the exchange window, or move it up to the band map and click on that and move my radio to that frequency. The chances of screwing up and clicking the wrong line that you wanted to click, and suddenly your radio moved to an entirely different band, it's just not worth it. So I try and stay with the function keys as best possible. Absolutely avoid the mouse at all cost. Certainly there are times that you have to maybe make a correction in the log, and the only way to get into that log, at least that I'm aware of, and granted I only know probably 15% of all of the capability of N1MM, is to take the mouse and then click on the field that you want to correct. But even doing that, it's not clean. You might click on the spot that you want, and you want to wipe out one element or backspace out of that and put in a new letter. Sometimes you have to hit the backspace twice in order to actually get the letter to disappear. It's just kind of quirky about that. But again, fundamentally, stay away from the mouse, and I think you'll be better off. And another thought that comes to mind, this not really relates to the mouse or the keyboard scenario, but if you hear like a long call or an odd call, I won't say things like 2 Echo 0 Yankee X-ray Yankee is an odd call, that's perfectly okay in the UK, and I appreciate that. But when you're in the heat of battle and people are calling at a fast rate, sometimes it's easier to get typed into the entry window, maybe just the suffix. You get, okay, Yankee X-ray Yankee, I got YXY, and then I'll just arrow back to the beginning of that call sign, and from memory, I'll put in the 2E0. He doesn't have to repeat it, but in your mind, you're holding on to some key element that you can reinsert in the call field to complete that exchange or the QSO. I'm not a touch typist by any way, so it's a lot of search and pounce and things like that. Another common thing that comes to mind here is keeping the entry window at the bottom of the monitor. In other words, close between, if your eyes are moving between the keyboard and the window, the entry window, you want to keep that distance as short as possible, ideally. Because you're going to be constantly going back. Did I type it in properly? With your outstanding non-touch typist skills. or some other thing. It just, it makes you somewhat more efficient, I think. I think some people sometimes will put an entry window up at the far top side or in the middle. I try and keep it kind of uncluttered around that area if I can, and then I just enter what I need to, and I can see it immediately.
I'm totally guilty of that. Mine is at the top of the screen. I'm going to move it as soon as we get off this call.
Yeah, you'll be happy for that.
So I've got a question for you when it comes to partial calls, and I've been wondering this for the past week. Let's say I hear a Golf 4 and then the last letter, Lima. Should I just ask for the Golf 4, or should I say Golf 4 Lima, even though I know there's a couple letters ahead of that?
I would say the whole thing, Golf 4 Lima, and let them figure out that, oh, you're responding to me, but you're missing 2 letters. I get that. It's way better. The more you can say back as near a complete call, the more you're going to be able to control the pileup. Because if you just come back and say Golf 4 or the Gulf station, you'll get M0s, you get M3s, you get GWs, you get everything coming back to you. And that was not what you were looking for. So as much as you can convey back, partial call or otherwise, do it. I think generally that's a good way to operate it.
So I know this is different with a pileup this week versus the contest, but how much work should I put into a weak signal caller?
Well, if it's a multiplier, you've ascertained that, okay, this prefix he's got is something I need, although you can get misreadings from N1MM. You put in a partial call in the entry window, it'll show red or green like, oh, this is a multiplier. Then after you finish getting the complete call, it turns out it was just another garden variety station out there. So, that's probably one motivating element to stay with it is a multiplier. But if you're sensing that there's QSB, like he comes up for part of the call and then he fades back down and you can't get it, and you've tried it a couple of times, maybe 3 times, then I'd say, hey, call me later. I'll be here all weekend, call me later, that kind of thing. And maybe he will return, maybe he won't. But, you give him, a decent shot at trying to get you. I run into this a lot with the non-contest activity during the week, get on 10 meters. I get called by somebody running 1 watt, and I can't hear them initially, or they're very, very weak, or I get part of a call, but there's no real pressure. It's not a contest. But I'll work with that guy to get him through and get him on the log. A lot of times they'll come back and say, hey, you're the first time I've ever talked to the USA. So, okay, that's very nice. But contesting, I don't know, I'd say maybe 2, possibly 3 times at the most. But if it looks totally fruitless, or the pileup is not behaving, in other words, they're not shutting up, and you're able to listen for this one guy, then you might have to say, sorry, I got to move on to the next guy, and just let it go.
Well, that's what I've noticed in my quote-unquote practice sessions this past week. I'm trying to get as many people in the log as possible for their sake. So I'm spending a lot of time giving some of these weak signals an opportunity, but I noticed this today. I ran about 200 in the hour before we got on this call, and the pileup just wasn't giving them any space. Now, on the other hand, there was a weak signal, and I worked with it, and it was E29 from Thailand, so I'm glad I took the time. But I didn't know that when I started. All I heard was, I think, GTW or TGW, so I'm really thankful I took the time for him.
Yeah, I rest my case. Yeah, that's great.
So, Mark, let's go back to the other question. I was probably jumping ahead a little bit, but when it comes to hours, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to put 36 in, but I'm going to try to. I may do the classic overlay also. How would I approach hours for this contest?
I would look at when are the bands open to Europe or maybe Asia, like JA. Again, where's the target opportunity parts of the world, for maximum score, assuming, that's kind of the motivation here. Or is it just, I just want to get used to running pileups. So I'll just pick times when it's wide open to Europe. And then when the band fades, I'll take a break. I'll take 5-6 hours off, go hit that restaurant down the street or go, take a dip in the water, which, by the way, I'm very envious of. But take it casual. But I would think about how do I offer the maximum exposure to the world out there during, some of the best times. And I would think, okay, in the morning to Europe, 10, 15, maybe 20 meters, so 20 meters to Asia. I'm not quite sure how the propagation might be this particular, contest for you in that, that part of the world. But hopefully you've got some experience about what parts of the world are coming in at what times. And overlay that thinking with, okay, where are the multiplier-rich regions that I might want to be on for? And obviously I'm going to attract, because I'm probably the only VP5 on. So that's kind of a given. That's easy. It shouldn't be an issue in attracting attention from whichever part of the world you're interested in. So, but that's kind of the way I would structure it. Nighttime, if you're not planning, or if you don't have maybe a good low band antenna, maybe just a few hours there, in the middle of the night, you can, for a 36-hour operating period, if that's what your goal is, you can get plenty of sleep and have a lot of fun, which is really the underlying issue in all of this is maximizing your fun. I mean, it's just a thrill to have, many, many hundreds of people calling you per hour. But that once in a while, geez, that Echo 21 that called in over the top of the pileup, it's like, are you kidding me? It just kind of, blows your mind. So all of those factors come to play, and it all rolls up to the word fun. So, that's where I'd be thinking, where am I getting the most fun for the hours I'm putting in?
Well, and I definitely want to have fun, but to be clear, I won't be jumping in the pool this weekend. I feel as though I'm here. This is a great opportunity at K4 QPL's great station. So I want to try to maximize my time and get as many QSOs in the log as possible. So, Mark, I really appreciate your advice today. This has all been very helpful.
Well, you're very welcome. It's been a lot of fun. And you do have a good signal from K4 QPL's place, which is VP5M and some of the other contests. And I guess there are plenty of plaques in the room to show for that. So the fabulous QTH.
I'm looking at 4 of the plaques right now. And when I came in the house upstairs, there's another 4 plaques, and they're all very intimidating. These are world wins, primarily in CW and primarily low power. But Jim has done a fantastic job here with the station, and it's relatively simple. If I hadn't said this when we started, we were using a K3, a KPA 500 into a step IR beam for 10 through 40, and then wire for 80 and 160. And the audio reports, the signal reports I've been getting from around the world are just astounding. So it's been a lot of fun.
I think that stepper is going to get a good workout this contest weekend. And even on 40, I mean, you'll be loud enough that you'll be able to do well. I probably wouldn't waste too much time on 80 meters. Again, most of your mults, I mean, all of the mults are prefixes, right? And that's going to come with high rates, just lots of people calling you. So wherever your signal's strongest on the different bands, that's where you want to concentrate. And, don't need to worry about working the same guy on different bands. I mean, that's nice and all, but just stay focused on rate, and multipliers will take care of themselves.
Well, Mark, I appreciate your mentorship. My name is Kevin Thomas W1DED. I've been talking to Mark Pride, K1RX. I hope to see you all in the CQ WPX single sideband contest next weekend. 73.
See you then.